All right, everyone. Macron's ridiculously lame attempt to buy off yellow vest uprisers and why it won't work. That's what we'll be talking about on today's video. A quick shout out to all of our new viewers. I can't thank you enough for being here. I post 2 videos a day analyzing current events in light of some really awesome conservative trends. We're going to get into those in a second. So if you would please smack that bell and subscribe button. We are on our countdown to 100,000 subs, and it'll be an absolute privilege to have you as one of them. All right, so now with his political career in peril and the future of globalist Europe in doubt, the French president Emmanuel Macron tried to quell the yellow vest uprising, which this past Saturday involved well over 100,000 people, as I'm sure you all know. Macron attempted to quell this uprising by addressing the French nation last night, and in doing so, it seems that he actually revealed more than he perhaps intended to. He delivered a pre-taped address on television that many are arguing actually differed significantly from his original dismissal of the demonstrators a few weeks back when he referred to them as thugs, right? They were nothing but thugs, which was in many ways Macron's basket of deplorables moment. And make no mistake, those words had consequences. His publicly declaring the yellow vest demonstrators as thugs led to the police authorities using over-the-top violent measures to crush the uprising, to crush the rebellion, right? Which, of course, neither they or Macron could. So over the course of 4 weeks now, the uprising has grown to proportions that Macron couldn't have imagined in his worst nightmares. And now his political career is in jeopardy. And so Macron did what every politician who's in trouble does. He tried to buy off the demonstrators. You see, this is why I don't think he's changed. I don't think he's being contrite, as many commentators have said. He still thinks they're thugs. And thugs can be bought off. Macron got on television and encouraged companies to give their workers bonuses. He promised to enact tax cuts. He pledged that he would raise the minimum wage and abolish taxes on overtime pay starting on January 1st. He promised to scrap a tax hike on pensioners. These indeed were significant concessions, no doubt. I mean, a number of the demonstrators voiced reforms for just such as these. And yet, given that Macron has absolutely no intention of slowing down the globalist enterprise that he has planned for France and for the whole of Europe, the truth is that these measures are just an attempt to shut these thugs up. It's Macron's attempt to buy his political future back, nothing more. But as it turns out, it's not going to work. And it's not going to work because even if we were to give Macron the benefit of the doubt, even if we were to assume that Macron was trying to make things right, his promises would still be little more than band-aid solutions to societal problems that are more akin to compound fractures. All he's doing is sweeping the deck of a sinking ship. Macron unveiled no radical changes, no major shifts in policy. Quite the contrary. He absolutely reaffirmed his globalist commitment to France and the whole of Europe and the EU superstate. And that's why his speech was greeted with so much skepticism. Immediately, protesters complained that Macron's supposed solutions were merely cosmetic. And there were already calls for new rounds of protests for as early as today, Tuesday. Macron appears to be making the same kind of mistake that so many analysts are making. He believes that this societal unrest can be resolved solely through economic means. Pay the people off, they go home happy, and the whole thing is done. But that is emphatically not what is going on here. Certainly not in France, nor in the whole of Europe. You just can't reduce problems to mere economics and think that a bit of tinkering here or there is going to do it. That's just not going to work anymore, not according to the data that we have. What Macron and his ilk don't get is that the nationalist populist uprisings going on in Europe began long before the 2008 economic crisis, long before it. Populist movements enjoyed their greatest successes in nations that were already experiencing rather strong economic growth long before 2008. For example, in Britain, Nigel Farage and his self-proclaimed People's Army first stormed the political stage in the European Parliament elections back in 2004. And that was after 48 consecutive periods of economic growth, drawing tremendous support from rather affluent conservatives. And in terms of the working class, one study found that before the 2008 economic crisis, working class voters were twice as likely as their middle class counterparts to vote for national populists in Austria, 3 times as likely in Belgium and France, and 4 times as likely in Norway. And that's precisely what we saw when it came to the last election in France. Marine Le Pen won an overwhelming majority in a single electoral demographic, and that was the working class, the very people who were donning yellow vests throughout the entire nation of Europe and beyond now, of course. In other words, though workers made up about half of the electorate, they delivered 2/3 of their votes to the national populists, particularly in France. This is emphatically not merely an economic issue that Macron could throw a few euros at and think it'll all go away. Really, at the heart of this uprising, this growing sense more and more that the elites in charge of all of our political, economic, media, and educational institutions, they operate and govern according to their own interests, which are emphatically not the interests of the common people, the populace. And when they try to make their voices heard, the populace, they simply feel like no one among the elite is listening to them. They certainly don't feel listened to by their politicians, but neither do they feel listened to by their corporatist globalist media, who care about a whole host of issues that have nothing to do whatsoever with the concerns of the average Frenchman. Remember, we talked about this in earlier videos. When asked the question by pollsters, do you believe that your politicians don't care about you or your concerns? 78% French responders agreed with that statement. 78% of French believe that their politicians don't care about them or their concerns. This is not about economics. This is fundamentally about a deeply rooted sense of disenfranchisement from the political conversation that more and more people feel they've been excluded from. And one of the reasons for this is that both France and Europe's elite want to foster multicultural societies within their respective nations, but the vast majority of populations want nothing to do with that. And again, the studies are absolutely conclusive on this. 95% of Dutch, Brits, Hungarians, Germans, Greeks, Poles, and yes, French, 95% believe that it is either very or somewhat important that people speak the official language of their nation. And this spans across political beliefs. This isn't right or left. And by the way, it drops a bit for Americans. Only 90% of Americans believe that. Okay. That's very important, or at least somewhat important for people within their nation to speak the dominant or official language. Over 80% of French believe that sharing their nation's cultural heritage is important to being part of the national community. They don't want anything to do with migrants, predominantly Muslim enclaves that are formed throughout their cities and their various regions. If you're going to be a permanent part of France, then 80% of French believe you need to be accustomed to their language and cultural heritage. Now, I bet we can all take a guess who these 20% are who don't believe that. They're at least the very elite that so much of the French population feels estranged from. Now, all of this, of course, is not to say that there aren't real economic issues that need to be dealt with, right? That's for sure. Again, these protesters are disproportionately the victims of globalization's worldwide division of labor, where manufacturing and industrial factory jobs are shipped out to third world nations while capital and finance are relocated to urban centers. And this process has left rural populations highly unemployed, and that's a lot of what's going on here. You have French citizens who don't have the money to live in Paris, but who can't work in their rural areas because of the high unemployment that came about directly as a result of this global division of labor that Macron is all for. And so they have to commute to the cities to work. And then Macron's government turns around and levies all these gas taxes on them in the process. I mean, if you just think about it, of course they're going to blow. It's ridiculous. They already blamed their government for having shipped their manufacturing and industry jobs, their factory jobs overseas to third world countries. Now they want to tax them, the people that have to drive cars in the cities, precisely because they shipped off their jobs from the rural areas, so they've had it. They don't want anything more to do with this. But the whole notion that all you have to do is throw some euros at the problem and think you've solved it, like Macron did in his speech, is just further proof that he is totally and completely removed from the basic concerns of so much of the French population. Macron really is a globalist. He really could care less about how people are disaffected by all these grand globalist reforms. He really does have the attitude, let them drive Teslas and be done with it, right? There's simply no evidence that he actually understands the massive tectonic shift that's been underway for several years now, long before any major economic crisis. And so Macron's concessions were all too little too late. Europe is changing right from under his feet, and these tectonic shifts are in many ways just getting started. Macron may have thought he could buy his way out of this, that he could buy back his political future. But in reality, as it turns out, the future belongs to the populists. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe. Click on our Patreon or PayPal links below. Become a supporter of this channel. As you know, we are periodically demonetized by YouTube, and we can really use your help so we can continue to analyze current events in light of awesome conservative trends so that you can personally and professionally flourish. God bless.